All right, so as I described in my whole life up to 2013, or yeah, it's something like 2014, I was a leftist communist. Then in 2014, I became a right winger. When I was a leftist communist, I was anti-religion and anti-white. And then when I was a right winger, I was pro-religion, pro-white. I didn't like religion because I thought I was white supremacist. Now, in 2014, I went back to becoming or 2015, I went back to becoming a left winger communist. And like I said, one of the things that happened was my friend was like, he said, I wrote out because I couldn't write raps unless I was playing serious basketball. And then I hurt my leg. I wanted to talk to my dad, but my mom's like, you can't force people to talk to you. I saw it as right wing orientation, like, blame the victim, blaming me, trying to say that I was the bad guy. But I knew that I wasn't. I knew it was a shooting machine. And I thought that it was just not compassionate. I wanted to talk to my dad. I thought that they were not being good parents. And I wanted to, and I wanted help with my leg and all types of stuff. And I just thought it was stupid that they were not talking to me and that they just dismissed me. So, and then I was trying to write a rap on my friend's timeline. He was Filipino and like a quarter white. And he told me something like, and I wrote cuss words in my rap. Now, the reason why is because I couldn't write good raps unless I was playing serious basketball. I can't write rhymes well unless I'm playing serious basketball. It's just the way my mind works. Now, my grandpa never understood that. He'd be like, well, it's just because, maybe your level of aliveness. It's not because you're nervous. No, it's because I'm nervous. Whenever I'm nervous, I could write good raps. But then my friend was like, well, no, he was like, what are you doing writing cuss words on my timeline? No wonder why Jews are a dying breed. And then, so I went back to being a left winger, to being against the right wingers. And, and like I said, I wrote that psychiatric slavery book where I said like everything's a social construction, white and black are social constructions and mental illness is a social construction and gender is a social construction. And it was an anti-white book because in the book I was saying like, how white people are actually Neanderthals. So, and it's ironic that they called black subhuman when really they're subhuman. And, but it turns out that even black people are related to Homo erectus and stuff. So they could even be called subhuman, but that's according to the science. But why do we even trust science again? But, people have agendas and we don't even know if that's accurate. But so at this time, I went back to being a left winger though. So I believed in science again and I believed in Darwinism and all that, right? And I was against religion again. And like one of the things I was arguing was, the reason why my parents wouldn't talk to me is because they abused me and they wanted to believe that I was schizophrenic so that they could justify the abuse that they did, say, oh, he deserved it. He was schizophrenic. But I was trying to say I was on the victim side. I was a victimologist and I was like, no, the reason why I went crazy or, quote unquote went crazy is because of the abuse that happened. It's your guys' fault. And the reason why I'm continuing is because, I'm being dismissed. You guys are throwing me to the side and everything. And you guys are neglecting me and all that. And I try to argue the same thing happened with black people where, they were abused in slavery. And now white people want to say like, you can't force us to like you, kind of like my parents are doing. And, oh, it's not our fault. Look at how crazy the black people are. Look at the rap videos. Look at all the crime they commit. Look at, all this stuff about them. They, by nature, they're bad. They're diseased. They're defective human beings. And I wanted to say like, the reason why white people want to say that is because, because of the abuse that was done to the black people. The only way that they could deal with the cognitive dissonance of having done the abuse is to say, well, they deserved it. And look how bad they are now. But I was trying to say the reason why they're so bad now is because of they're dismissed and they're treated bad, and because of the past. They're still suffering because of the past. And I want to say the same thing with me. That's what's going on with me. And so I became like a left winger again. But again, I was anti-white and I wanted to mix the races. And I tried to argue the same thing about gender. Right? When I was a right winger, I wanted to believe in that gender was biological and all that type of stuff and that there is gender. But then when I became a left winger and I wanted white people to mix again and I wanted to destroy the white race, the Aryan race, I wanted to believe that gender was a social construction too. And I said the same thing about witches, that, it's the Pygmalion effect. The white man wants women to act bad. So they do. And the same thing with black people, the white man wants it and the people's expectations are fulfilled. and it's the Pygmalion effect. It's a psychological principle, and so that's the argument that I was trying to make. And then I argue the same thing about mental illness, that it's just a Pygmalion effect, that it's just suggestibility by the doctors, and it's really just a way to perform eugenics on, on people who are thrown to the side by society, by identified patients. Kind of the same thing that Foucault is Italian. He kind of looks kind of brown, and he's kind of looks kind of Jewish, right? And he's also a homosexual, and he's very leftist. And he kind of argues the same thing, that there's no such thing as schizophrenia, even any disease, that it's just a scapegoat mechanism. So I wanted to say, yeah, they're just scapegoats. And I wanted to say the same thing about Jews. I was like, I wanted to kind of equate Jews and black people, because remember, I always saw Jews as more black, and I wanted to mix the white people, and I wanted to make the white people think that the Jews are so awesome because they're mixed with black, and it's best to be mixed. That thesis that, oh, when you're mixed, you have stronger DNA, and it's almost like making the black people, or making the people of color, the greatest, right? And making the white people bad. And that's what I was trying to do, because I saw myself as Jewish and I wanted to defeat the Aryans. So I went back to being a leftist and being a communist. And I think that is what leftism is. Liberals, Democrats, it's kind of an anti-white type of thing. And that's what I became. So, I became like, so I was trying to argue like that, it's not the Jews' fault. The reason why Jews became money lenders is because the whites forced them into that, because the whites wouldn't do money lending because of Christianity, and again, trying to put down Christianity, destroy religion. I went back to being a leftist, wanting everybody to mix, wanting the white people to mix, destroy the white race, and probably make the Jews supreme, right? But the thing is, but I saw the Jews as more people of color, right? So I wanted just to defeat the white people, especially the Aryans. So I'm saying it was only, and the reason why Jews are in porn, it's not because, it's actually because of the white people, because the other avenues were cut off for the Jews. And so they got involved in porno and all this type of stuff. And, see, the white people would try to blame the Jews and say the reason why we're bad to Jews is because look at them. They're in porn. They're money lenders. They're bankers. They, they do all this bad stuff. And I wanted to be like, no, and the reason, and even the reason why the Jews are some people argue the reason why the Jews do porno and stuff like that is because they don't like white people. But I'm like, well, of course they don't like white people, because white people, they treated them poorly, and they basically abused them. And I wanted to kind of believe that Jews were a nomadic people, like the Cain and Abel story, that Cain was an agriculturalist and Abel was a nomad, and Cain kills Abel. And I wanted to believe yes, the Jews are more nomadic, kind of like black people, and that's why the agriculturalist white people destroyed them and stuff like that. And it was an anti-white diatribe, right? It was a leftist type of thing. But at the same time, I'm trying to be like, but race is a social construction. There's no such thing as race. It's all the leftism to just destroy the white people, destroy the Aryans, right? But that's what I became again. Because, so yeah, and then the thing was, at the time, my grandpa was trying to tell me oh, your mom and dad won't talk to you because, he was basically kind of justifying that they're not talking to you. He was saying that I always said, I always thought that my grandpa was a right winger. He would say that there is no innocent victims. And I was like, okay, he's a victim blamer. And my grandpa was upset with me because I was complaining about how my parents were mistreating me and not talking to me and stuff. My grandpa was like, well, blaming and complaining, and he called them the deadly bees, bitching, bulldozing. He said, that's all self-confirmatory, and that's not the flow and stuff. And I was bitching and bemoaning and complaining and stuff, right? But then I was like, again, this is more just white supremacist stuff. My grandpa's just like, oh, well, of course it's easy to not bitch and complain and not, and all that stuff if you're white and you're doing well and you're on top of society. But it's for the the victims and stuff, for the minorities and all that stuff. Yeah, there's more bitching and complaining because they're more abused, right? So that's what I tried to, that's what I was trying to, that's the way I saw it. And I was like, it's easy for you to be like, yeah, don't complain and don't, but that's just a way to maintain the status quo. I was a Marxist, remember? I went back to being a Marxist. So I was like, yeah, of course you want people to not complain and not, get angry and not, fight back. And I'm like, I'm being mistreated, and I want people to know, and I want it to change. And my grandpa be like, you can't force people to change, and they have to ask the question first. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. You just want to maintain the status quo. These are perfect sayings for people who just want to maintain the status quo and keep the victims, and I'm the victim here. And I was just upset. And so, this was a situation. So I went back to being a leftist, and and I went back to being anti-white and all that. And I remember, like, even when the like Muslims, the brown people, were doing rebellions, or like they were doing like riots in Germany, my grandpa was like, that's not the way to act. And I was like, I'm happy that they're doing it, because again, I was anti-white. And I was like, yeah, well, probably the Germans are mistreating them. Like, you guys are mistreating me. And I saw my grandpa as a white supremacist and as German, and I thought that he was mistreating me. And at the time, he stopped teaching me again, and I'll get to that. But or I'll get to that now. Like, I was trying to talk to my grandpa, and I was telling him, like, dude, this whole, like, you trying to make me independent stuff, it's screwed stuff up. It's made things bad for me. And and my grandpa was talking about, like, that he thought that I should get a job, and getting a job would be like the mono myth, and it will help me to gain competence and expand my awareness, and it'll be a part of the synergistic happenings of the universe and everything. And he believed that life was an anti-entropic reordering function, and if I get a job, I'll be a part of the anti-entropic reordering function, and all this, and there's consequences not getting a job. And again, I was like, this guy's just a white supremacist, and all into getting jobs and stuff, and that's what he wants to maintain the status quo. And I was a Marxist. I was against it. And I was like, the status quo is corrupt. And really, I just wanted to get the quadrant stuff out, and I wanted to get help with my knee. But my grandpa, and my grandpa was like, your software is not ready to talk to your dad, and he wasn't helping me talk to my dad. And he's like, and I was like, well, why don't you tell? And he told me that my grandpa told me that my parents misunderstood his teachings, and that they had predator-prey software. They expressed predator-prey software, and they should be talking to me. But I was like, well, then why don't you tell them that? And he's like, well, because they won't ask they're not asking the questions. Once they ask the questions, I can tell them. But I didn't believe him, because he looked down upon me, and my grandpa also didn't believe the quadrant model. And that was another reason why I was more like anti-white, was because I remember this Jewish guy told me that Germans don't believe in Hashem, and they don't believe that there's a higher order, like a higher pattern, or like they don't believe in like gematria and stuff like that. And my grandpa was proving them right, because my grandpa was like, yeah, that's all magic thinking. He said the quadrant model is magical thinking. He said, I told my grandpa how, like, there's this one like magician who made a cross, and it made it rain and stuff in the ground. It was like a Jewish guy, and he made a cross, and he made a circle, and it started to rain. My grandpa's like, that's magical thinking. He's like, you really think that there's like power in a cross, in that symbol? And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, yes, we're living in like a matrix. We're living in a matrix where stuff like that can happen, and this matrix is oriented around this form, the form of the cross. And I'm like, yes, stuff like that can happen. But my grandpa was like, yes, some things are organized in fours, so what, But my grandpa thought that, what about all things organized in threes? What about things organized in seven? He's like, no, he didn't think the quadrant model was significant. He didn't think it was true. And he was like, that's magical thinking, and he didn't believe in gematria. Like, that's the thing is, but that's what also was moving me more toward leftism too, was because he was against the ideas of the supernatural kind of, and that was confusing me, because, I thought he was a right-winger, but right-wingers tend to be for religion. But my grandpa is more like, yeah, I don't believe in gematria. I think that people just look for patterns, and he didn't believe, because I said the JEPD theory is there's 4 parts of the Torah. And I'm like, but those 4 parts represent the 4 quadrants, so it's a supernatural component. My grandpa's like, no, he believed that it was really just compiled by, just nomads and stuff. And he said, God never spoke to anybody, but maybe some people were inspired and they were in the flow. And a lot of the Bible was written in the flow, but really it was just a compilation by desert nomads. And, I liked that when I was a left-winger, because remember, I was against religion because I thought religion was white supremacist, and it maintained division and everything. And it maintained the white race, and but so my grandpa started believing that, and he's like, yeah, there's no such thing, God doesn't speak to people, and that's magical thinking, and that's the belief that there's a separate being who's, and this isn't even what metapsychiatry teaches. Like Dr. Hora, he believed that God was infinite intelligence, and I think that he would understand more what I was trying to say, that there is a supernatural component, and there is that type of stuff. But my grandpa tried to be very naturalistic and very rationalistic, and he was like New Age modernism, like Teilhard de Chardin, like, yes, we're moving toward the omega point, and there's a complexification of energy systems. But no, my grandpa thought it was magical thinking that, that the human is organized around the quadrant model and the quadrant pattern. But I had all this evidence, but my grandpa wouldn't even look at the evidence because he didn't know how to use Facebook, and he didn't know how to go on the pages. And I wanted to show him, but he's like, I'm not interested. And again, I thought that this was like proof what the rabbis are saying, that Germans don't understand, the truth about Hashem and about the universe. And so again, this was like even making me even more left wing, because I was like, and more anti-white. So I want to mix white people even more. And then I'm seeing my grandpa as like a Nazi kind of too, in terms of like, one of the things that I learned from a rabbi was he was saying that the Amalekites were maybe related to Germans, and the God said to kill the Amalekites, and the thing was, he was saying that that the reason why is because when the Israelites left Egypt, the Amalekites wouldn't give them food because they thought that the Israelites would steal from them and stuff. And again, it's like they're stingy. And I was like, yeah, well, my grandpa's against welfare and he's against, communism and stuff like that. And yeah, because he's a white supremacist and he's like an Amalekite. And again, I became a left-winger, anti-white person again. Right. And ironically, like, I knew that the quadrant model was true and stuff, but I was taking my grandpa's notions of, my grandpa just confused me, because it's like he didn't see the truth of the quadrant model and the supernatural components and stuff, and he trying to be all naturalistic, but at the same time he seemed a little bit right wing. Like, I think that he was against communism, he was against socialism, because he said that that's then people parasite and stuff like that, and it's good to work because when you work, then you're a part of the anti-entropic reordering function. And I always saw that as right wing. So he confused me. Like, some things he's talked about seemed left wing and some things seemed right wing. And he was just really confusing me. But anyways, I got confused. And at this time, he didn't teach me what the flow was yet. I didn't understand what he was talking about. And again, he stopped teaching me at this point because we got in an argument, because I was upset with him about how my mom and dad wouldn't talk to me, and he wasn't helping my mom and dad to talk to me. And I felt like he was a big part to blame, and we got in an argument, and then he stopped teaching me. So he left me in the dark again, and I was confused. I didn't understand the quadrant model. And so everything was just going out of control, and I became a leftist again, and I became anti-white again. And this was like 2014, 2015. So, but then I will become a right winger again later, but I'll get to that. But then I'll go become a right winger again, and I became a left winger again, and I became a right winger again. And now I think I understand what metapsychiatry is in the flow. And I understand, my grandpa didn't understand what metapsychiatry. His teachings are not the same as Dr. Hora's. What my grandpa's teacher, Dr. Hora, who my grandpa got a PhD in psychology through by learning metapsychiatry. So my grandpa didn't really understand him, and I didn't know that at the time. But my grandpa just confused me, because he was trying to be all new age and like God is energy, and everything is energy and everything is one and it's all energy, and but to me that was always like a leftist way of looking at things, but also it is kind of religious and kind of right wing, and I was just confused. He just confused me. I was like, and also the fact that he didn't understand the quadrant model, and he discounted the quadrant model, that made me even more confused by him. I'm like, well, you don't understand reality. And then he's trying to like put me down, like, Ryan, don't blame, don't complain, and all this stuff, and he's not helping me, and I'm going to get more to the victim blaming stuff that he was doing. But I just started to not like my grandpa. Like, I was starting to get upset with him, and and I'll get more to that later. But basically what ended up happening was, I had a hurt leg. I needed help with my leg. So I finally went, I went to a doctor's appointment, and I went to my grandma's house, and my grandpa wasn't letting me at his place anymore. And I'll get to this later. But I ended up, getting an argument with him with my uncle, because my uncle was upset with my grandpa too, that my grandpa had me hurt, had my leg hurt with the whole psych ward thing and everything. And my uncle was like, dude, my uncle started calling my grandpa a red devil, the Rojo Diablo. So, I was upset, and but I went to my grandma's house and I had a hurt leg. I wanted my grandma to help me, and I wanted my grandma to ask my dad if he can, talk to me and help me with my leg. So I went to my grandma's house, and my sister was there, and my sister told me like, no, leave, get out of here. And like, I'm just so upset, because I'm like, why is everybody treating me like such shit? I discovered theory of everything, and my whole family's treating me like shit. And this is all like, and I was a leftist. So I felt like a victim. And then, so I started picking up pots and I started throwing them at the door, because my sister wouldn't let me into my grandma's house. And then my sister called the police. So I left. But then later, I'm going to get to this. Then later, I ended up having to go to court again for throwing the pots at my grandma's door, because my sister wouldn't let me into the house. but then my sister and my family ended up moving to Texas right after this. So I'll get to this more later.